Hey everyone, this is Seth Klebe, the host of Watch the Tech. I want to welcome you to this episode, and I also would like to welcome you to my brand new podcast studio. God, that felt good to do. Like any startup, this studio is a work in progress and not perfect, but it's going to get there, and I'm just incredibly excited to be sharing this with everyone. So I have a phenomenal guest today, and they have a great YouTube channel of their own. They've got a great product, so I think you're going to love them. But before, I would like to tell you about the watch that I'm wearing. So what I have here is a Patek Philippe Calatrava, specifically the 5120G variety. It's also definitely my dressiest watch. No debate. This is just a classic men's dress watch, and I love everything about it. But specifically, what drew me to this watch first is the dial. It's just very clean, very striking white in lacquer, and it doesn't have lume. I normally love watches with lume. However, you just don't need it on this watch because the black superimposes so well onto the white that even in low light you can read it. Also, around the case is the classic Patek hobnailing. It just glimmers, but just enough. It's not flashy, but if you know it's there and you see it, you really appreciate it. Next, what I love about this watch is the back. And I'll definitely talk about the back of the movement, but also just the clasp. So the original owner of this watch was able to get the white gold folding clasp that Patek has absolutely perfected. It actually adds some weight to the watch too, and so I'm really into this, and it just feels so easy to put on, take off, etc. And then last, and certainly not least, because it is my number one favorite thing about this watch, is the inside movement. So it's the first micro rotor movement that I own, and it is finished to absolute perfection. So this is the 240 movement. Just a fun fact is this movement came out the same year as the Macintosh computer sometime in 1970. So now that I've told you a little bit about the watch, I also want to tell you about our sponsor. So this episode is sponsored by Rocky Mountain Watches. And what's so great about them, they're Colorado based, is they really understand the concept of rugged luxury, which is actually my favorite kind of concept when it comes to watches. So rugged luxury essentially just means that it's a watch that you can take hiking, swimming, whatever life is going to throw at you that's a little bit more active, but then you can still wear that watch to a nice dinner, date night, a show, whatever it is. Blending of use cases is something that I'm really interested in. And so Rocky Mountain Watches executes that super well. So you should definitely reach out to them. If you're looking for a watch, they can help you find and procure watches. They also have a great selection of their own. And with that, we're going to get into the episode. Thanks so much. All right. Max Ma, welcome to Watch the Tech. How are you doing?
Good. How are you, Seth?
I am doing fantastic. This is my first episode in my new podcast studio of sorts. So it's a pleasure that we get to take this journey together, and hopefully the sign doesn't like completely fall down halfway through.
I love it. Great sign.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It was actually a holiday gift from my girlfriend. Well, dude, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today for a number of reasons. One, I mean, you're just a fellow watch lover like myself, but also I have been using your product for the last year or so, that being WatchCrunch. So for people who don't know Max and his work, he's the co-founder of a watch community, which you can download on Apple and Android devices. It's a great place for anyone who loves watches.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I do see your presence on our app, and you have great taste in watches, and congrats on the new AP. It's like a social media app for watch nerds who hate social media, is the way that I would put it. We kind of take the best of forum Instagram, Reddit, and we collapse it into one all-encompassing watch app.
I think one of the things that I also really appreciate about WatchCrunch is I'm taking my love and addiction of watches off of other social media platforms and I'm like focusing it on WatchCrunch. So I think
Yeah.
that might have to be an unintended benefit of WatchCrunch being in existence.
Yeah, I'll call them refugees from other platforms. You know, I think a lot of people get turned off from using other apps and other platforms. I'm not here to kind of badmouth anybody else, but for me, just personally, the genesis of WatchCrunch was really out of necessity. Me with a few watch friends. um, just got to a point where we felt like we didn't enjoy using old school forums and we wish there was more kind of back and forth conversation on places like Instagram. You know, you can do that like one-on-one in chats, but just building that kind of community where everybody gets to chime in. One of these guys that I was talking to was a developer. So he's like, hey, like, why don't we try to throw something together, self-fund it for a couple years and see what happens? So it's really like a grassroots kind of movement that started, and immediately we started getting a lot of interest. What I've really been surprised by is just how positive the tone has been. We definitely do a bit of moderation, but in general, people are really protective of the platform, and so they kind of self-moderate, which was something unexpected, especially on the internet that is known to be can be a kind of a toxic place.
You know, it's interesting you say that because I'd never thought of it until now, but I have not seen one single negative post or comment on WatchCrunch, and I would have to agree with you. It feels like a safe place. And don't get me wrong, there's like plenty of people where I'll post a picture of one of my watches, and they're like, not for me.
Mm-hmm.
Don't love it, and that's fine, right? Like that's the beauty of it is you get to have your own preferences, but no one's an asshole about it.
You know, it's hard to kind of from the top down dictate the tone of a place. And so that was probably the biggest worry is how do we build a place that doesn't just set itself on fire immediately? I like to think that people who follow me are all gentlemen, but if you compare like my YouTube comment section versus WatchCrunch, you can see a pretty glaring difference. Whereas I think there's a self-selection process where it selects for a certain type of people who are into having deeper discussions, and then they kind of get a feel for the tone of the place. You know, it's sort of like the environment breeds the tone, and it kind of is a chicken and an egg thing. Self-propagates.
It's funny about the YouTube comment section, but I don't know about you, but when I received my first negative YouTube comment, I kind of took it as a badge of honor. I was like, huh, there's like enough people checking out my episodes that like someone wants to throw something hateful in there. I don't even remember what the comment was, but I just remembered I was like, huh, I think I might have I made it? Is that what is this what making it is
Yeah,
like?
you should you should start like printing out comments and sticking it on that wall behind you.
I should. I do actually have an absurd amount of real estate behind me. Well, Max, what were you doing before WatchCrunch? You're the only guest that I've had so far who has no LinkedIn profile, so my ability to stalk you was actually way less than normal.
I'm kind of a private guy. Before watches and ongoing is I'm actually a neurologist at the university here in Seattle, University of Washington. So I promised my mom that I wouldn't quit being a doctor to be a watch influencer. So yeah, I'm still working almost full time as a neurologist. As you can imagine, being a neurologist is very kind of a left brain endeavor. It's essentially just solving little puzzles, but the puzzles are humans. They're sort of like broken things. You got to kind of try to figure out like where the disconnection is. It's like an electrician for the body. And then the watches are more kind of a right brain phenomena for me. What I love is like the design and the history and the arts and just the nerdy parts as well, like the movement and the finishing and whatnot. But creating watch content is very much kind of a creative endeavor. And so it's allowed me to express my whole self, if you will, by kind of doing two jobs. You know, through the pandemic, I felt like I was doing two full-time jobs. And now I've been able to hire some friends that I've met through watches and maybe cut back a little bit on the doctor stuff to try to find more of a balance. So
Yeah. I mean, you definitely have to create balance. And what a cool surprise that you're a neurologist and the co-founder of something as cool as WatchCrunch. I actually really relate to you. Like I view my professional job. I'm a sales manager for a technology company, and that is where I'm operating, I'm solving problems. It's still creative in its own way for sure, and I really enjoy that. But then everything on the other side with Watch the Tech has been where I've really been flexing my creative muscles. So I want to start seeing some of the watches that I know you've brought, but there's a couple of members of my watch club who are doctors themselves, and we've had this conversation. So I want to see if it tracks with you. When you're going into work, are you very intentional about the watch that you wear because of how you feel patients might react to something that's on the wrist?
Not really. For me, it's much more just like, what am I wearing? What, on that particular day, what pairs well with it. And sometimes it's just, you just wake up and you're like, oh man, I need to put that IWC on. Like, I dreamed about it, or something, it's been a month and I miss it. And, I get cravings, right? So this watch I'll wear like once every couple months, but when I get a craving for the Spitfire thing, nothing else will scratch it.
Cool. That's awesome. And it's very freeing as well. I'm really similar, but then I do find myself, if I'm going to like an on-site or a customer dinner, I actually tend to pick my most understated watch because I don't necessarily want it to be catching anyone's attention.
What would that be?
I find myself wearing my Vacheron Constantin 56 often when it comes to client stuff, because I feel like it's modern sizing, but it's not big at all. It's still pretty thin. The dial is very clean, and unless you know that particular case shape or Vacheron, you're just gonna think like, oh, it's just the dude wearing a watch. And that's kind of how I like it.
When you say understated, you don't mean like economical. You just mean like stylistically understated.
I mean, there's a big difference between wearing a Rolex and wearing a Vacheron, or even like this Patek, because I just find like the cleaner the lines, the less iconic in mainstream social media, the better when it comes to a professional setting.
Keep them guessing.
Right. And then, of course, like if it's someone that is interested in watches, then usually that person would be like, oh, this is a really cool watch. It's just not something that's necessarily like noticed immediately, right, by most people.
Right. Yeah, I guess I just don't think much about other people when I wear my watches. For me, it's very intuitive. It's just, what do I feel like today, and which one of my puppies needs some love?
I really agree with you, actually, Max. Besides that one scenario, every other time.
What's your beater watch?
Ooh, my beater watch. That's a great question. I want to know yours too. My beater watch is my Hermes. Wait.
Is that, that has a really interesting, like, it's almost like a squarish case shape. Is that right?
Cushion case for sure. It's a graphene case, titanium back, titanium buckle, rubber, and like no one knows what it is when I wear it. I play tennis with it. I swim with it. I go to workout classes in it. I travel with it. So it gets a lot of wrist time, I would say. But
that's a enthusiast deep cut right there.
Yeah, it's just built to be fucked with, for lack of a better term. What's your beater?
This is kind of a beater. It's my Seiko, the Willard. I was thinking about this today. Even kind of mature enthusiasts usually still love their Seikos. And oftentimes, I feel like the G-Shock, Casios, and Seikos, you never kind of grow out of them, right? My first watch was a Seiko, and I thought, okay, this is a phase, right? Once I kind of get comfortable and know what I'm doing, I'm probably going to move past Seikos. And I'm just looking at the watches around me. I see at least 3 or 4 Seikos, and it's just one of those things that I'm still trying to articulate this. And when I finally do, I'll probably make a video about it. But it's like that. It's like that Brokeback Mountain line. It's like, damn, Seiko, I just can't quit you.
Oh my God, that's so funny. Let's stay on the brand topic for a second. Like, is there a favorite watch brand that you have?
For me, I wouldn't say I'm really loyal to one brand, different brands do different watches well. And it's rare that a brand can cover all their bases. Like if I want a dress watch, which I'm not a huge dress watch guy, if I like my version of a dress watch is like a sporty Cartier. Like it's a big chunky Cartier.
And that the one that you just had, is that a Santos?
That's a Santos 100. Yeah.
Okay, got
It's
it.
like it's like a tank, and it's a loomed Cartier, right? Like it's got loom
So
on it.
cool.
So I do like kind of unique references within a brand that in some way kind of like break some rules, right? And I feel like the Santos 100 kind of broke some rules with Cartier. It's like it's a chunky watch with loom, but it still has that classic Cartier, dial, right? So it's just like the sub. If you see somebody wearing a sub, you don't know if they're really a watch enthusiast. They could have just walked into an AD and said, "What is the Rolex to buy?" Just like if somebody walked into Cartier and said, like, what's the Cartier to have? They probably walk out with a tank, right? But to me, the Santos is a much more interesting watch. This is trying to be like a sporty dress watch.
Right.
And the whole idea of like, oh, like the Santos was the first pilot's watch, but like what pilot is looking at Roman numerals while they're flying?
Right. And how many pilots today actually wear one?
Right.
Zero.
Yeah.
100%. How many scientists are wearing Rolex Milgauss watches?
Yeah.
Probably, maybe like two. And
Yeah.
it's probably a gift. That actually reminds me of probably one of my favorite watch fail stories of all time.
Mhm.
Before I lived in Atlanta, I lived in San Francisco, and I was at a Bay to Breakers party.
Run across the peninsula, right? Mhm.
Exactly. It's like top to bottom run in San Francisco, and I have never run it. I never will. That's not my thing, but I will absolutely celebrate those who do and wear a costume. But I was in one of my friends' backyards, and this was, I don't know, probably 6 years ago, and I noticed this guy was wearing a Rolex Daytona white dial, and it looked like it had definitely like been with him for a while, and I was like, man, like that's such a cool Daytona. Like I haven't seen a ton of those like out in the wild. What's the story behind it?
Mhm.
And he just looked me dead in the eyes and disappointed me, and what he said was, oh, I just got it because I know that these are really popular and nice. I was just like, cool, and turn and leave.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like you get a sub if you're like a junior associate, getting your first bonus. And then you get the Daytona if you're like somebody who is somebody and has some connections. I have friends who have that, the Panda Daytona who are uber watch nerds, right? But that's the thing is like when watches elevate, certain models beyond the hobby and become this commodity, they kind of lose my interest in many ways. And I think if the guy you talk to, his response was like, I got this because people told me it's the watch to get, but there's so much I need to learn. Like, tell me more, like, teach me something about watches. Like, that's a different attitude, right? And like, that's somebody I would love to have a beer with, right?
Well, I know we don't have too much time left, so if you're okay with it, I would love to just do a little bit of an adult show and tell here with some of the other watches that you brought.
Okay. Just like pull random watches.
Yeah, just pull a couple random ones and let's just see what you go with.
Okay. So, I mean, to follow up our conversation about Seiko and how Seiko just does everything, my most expensive Seiko is this Grand Seiko. It's the SPGA 415, I think. It's like the winter edition. And it has like that crazy dial that looks like the winter sky and whatnot.
They really do dials just like chef's kiss.
Look, it's not the perfect watch. I think Grand Seiko has a lot of things to work on. It's been kind of talked to death, but like that watch has like a $10,000 dial and a $500 bracelet, right? And so I immediately took it off the bracelet because it kind of cheapened the whole experience. But they've been evolving, and I think they're moving in the right direction. But coming back to this idea, like that's a great demonstration of just like the upper limit of like where Seiko can go. I've got like this Seiko Alpinist. And what's great is, you shouldn't be afraid to modify a Seiko because they're usually on the cheaper end, and you open them up, learn something. So I took this one apart. I changed the date wheel to be black because I felt like it was just kind of garish to have like this beautiful dark green dial with a white date wheel. Took the Cyclops off because I think only the Cyclopses only look right on Datejust. So it's just like a lot more clean version of the same watch.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I do love Seikos. What else? My oldest watch is probably this guy. That's a pull router, and this is
Wow.
the I think this is from the late 50s, early 60s. Probably the oldest object that I own, and this is the same reference that Bruce Lee wore when he was alive. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's beautiful.
I would say the other watch I get an itch for a lot, but only very occasionally, is this bad boy.
There we go. All right. Panerai enters the chat.
It's
Nice.
44 millimeter Luminor, a watch that you never think that a guy with my wrist could pull off. But yeah, it was Evan at You're Terrific when I visited him in Portland. He had one of them, and the moment I put on my wrist, I was like, "Oh, something's happening. I've been inception." Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. It's like that scene in Harry Potter where he gets his wand. It's like the watch chooses the wizard,
Yeah,
Max.
yeah, it's surprising. I mean, maybe the short lug to lug, maybe the curvature of the lugs, it's extremely wearable. Somebody with a 6.5 inch wrist can easily wear a 44 millimeter Panerai, which you would not think was possible on paper.
Yes, I would agree. The Panerai that I have is a 42. It's the Luminor Due, so a little
Hmm.
bit thinner, a little bit smaller.
Yeah.
And that to me is like the perfect size. But if I've learned one thing about watches over the last year or so, it's that just because it says it's 44 millimeters or 42 millimeters or 37 millimeters, that doesn't actually mean shit. It's all about how
Yeah.
it actually feels on your wrist and
Hmm.
how it looks, and then also I think how big the dial crystal is a big factor into like the overall size when you're actually like looking at your watch.
Yeah. Yeah. I have plenty of experience with like 39 millimeter watches that wear worse than 42 millimeter watches. So I think there's probably a hour-long podcast there in terms of all of these kind of experiential things that get into the nitty-gritty of lug shape, lug angle, case diameter, case thickness, like component of crystal versus mid case to the height. Like it's the numbers can be very deceiving.
Yeah, we'll leave that to like Tim Masso to go figure out. That can be him for sure. I'll stay out of that one. What about a Grail watch? What's the one that Max is like, all right, I don't have it, but if I did, I'd feel pretty complete.
I've thought long and hard about this idea, and I have to say, the the Grail watch is like an oasis in the desert. It's something that you pine after, but may or may not actually exist. For me, every time I've thought I had a Grail watch and I've arrived at that, it's just been the next watch. And so to me, a Grail watch is just a watch you kind of lust after. But to me, the hobby is not about achieving some destination. It's the excitement of the idea of a Grail watch. So I would just say that my current lust is, and it's completely unexpected. I was just hanging out at the AD and he had a GMT, Bruce Wayne. And when he handed that to me, things changed. My spine sort of started to tingle a little bit. And so I am now officially on the wait list for a Bruce Wayne. um, yeah, so we'll see. We'll say that's my next lust.
Next lust. Yeah, I think that's fair, and it absolutely is a journey. And watches that you absolutely wanted, they lose their shine. Watches that you looked at and passed over, then years pass and you revisit it and then you fall in love with it.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have time for like one more watch. I would love to know like what's kind of the one that you're just like really proud to have in your collection.
Like a never gonna sell it kind of watch.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
well, it's not an expensive watch, but it's one of the early watches. Sometimes I do these like watch builds on the channel. I'm a very visual guy. And so sometimes there are certain elements of watches where I'm like, man, if they just change this one thing, it'd be perfect, you know? And I'm sure all watch enthusiasts have that reaction to certain things. And I get to scratch that itch. Sometimes I just like want to build something. And so I built this probably like 3 years ago. And I really wanted to see what broad arrow Omega hands will look like on a Explorer dial.
Yeah.
And the case is a Seiko Sarb case. And so it's not like a cheap little build because it still has really complex kind of facets and whatnot. And to me, it just kind of represents like why I got into the hobby. Like you've got a Seiko case, Omega hands, and Rolex dial. And that's how my brain works. And I love it. I'm never going to sell it. A lot of people have asked me if I would. But it's the 38 millimeter Explorer that Rolex never made.
As our time comes to a close, I just want to first thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to meet with me and talk through watches and a little bit about your background. Is there anything that you'd like to share with my viewers coming at WatchCrunch that they should know about?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me. This has been really fun chatting with you. We've had some communications on the app and really enjoy your content, and good luck with kind of growing this great idea that you have, combining watches and technology. I think it's a natural marriage. Yeah, check out the WatchCrunch app. It's free to use. It's a huge community, over 100,000 members, and growing every day. The big thing this year is we're working on a marketplace where people can sell to each other. So look forward to that coming online. And then the other thing is I'm in the process of patenting my own watch strap. Through the years, I really enjoy sports watches, military watches. So I've really liked NATO straps, but I've realized as I love the look, but I hate the fit because they tend to raise the watch up off your wrist, and especially if you kind of a skinnier wrist, you got this watch sitting 2-3 millimeters off your wrist and kind of wobbles around, just doesn't feel right. So what I developed is this looks like a NATO strap, right? But I call it the Zero Pass. So there's actually no strap material under the watch. It's just the case right on top of your wrist. So yeah, you can kind of learn more about it at anachronist.shop. So yeah, if you're interested in a NATO that doesn't have anything underneath it, we make them.
Super cool. No, that's great. I'm going to go check those out. Thank you again. Also, the sponsor for this episode is Rocky Mountain Watches. So thank you to them as well. I really appreciate you guys. And if you enjoyed watching this, please like and subscribe to my growing channel. It would mean a lot to me. And with that, we will end the episode.